So now coming to the stage, we have a panel on race in the Constitution. So this will be good. It was actually written by GianCarlo Canaparo with Heritage. But we have Curtis Hill and then Kariem Haqq to speak.
All right, welcome back, everyone. My name's Curtis Hill. I'll be your moderator for this next portion of the event. And very exciting, we have two authors here. We have GianCarlo Canaparo, wave at everybody. And he's from the Heritage Foundation. He's written a book, hold your book up, if you would, Race in the Constitution. And what I like about this book is it's my size for reading purposes. Hold that up again.
It's my size for writing purposes as well.
I can get that done real quickly. Now, to counter that, we have on my right Kariem Haqq. And Kareem's book, on the other hand, hold your book up. That's a phone book. And but it's on the what's the title of that?
The title is the 13th Amendment Freedom Week Manual.
Super. So what we're going to do, I'm going to ask both of these gentlemen to take a few minutes and talk a little bit about the background of their book. We'll start with GianCarlo and then move over to Kariem.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. The inspiration of the book, I think, is probably no surprise. In the wake of the pandemic and the racial unrest, there has been this concerted movement to say that America's sins on the race issue in the past mean that the American ideals are fraudulent or false. And what actually inspired this book, of all things, can I quote W.E. Du Bois here without, you give credit where it's due. He has this beautiful line, and he says, I sit with Shakespeare and he winces not. Across the color line, I sit with Balzac and Dumas in gilded halls. And the same thing goes for me as, a middle-class white boy from California who's, never suffered anything significant. I sit with Frederick Douglass and with Thomas Sowell and, these historical great African-American figures who have made America what they are, and I am moved by them. And they speak to me across time and the color line in much the same way that Shakespeare spoke to Du Bois, because they're speaking the same language that the founders spoke when they wrote the Declaration. It's a language of eternal truth, a language that says justice is eternal, that truth is unchangeable, that wisdom is attainable. And if you speak that language, you are able to engage that spark of the divine, right? That reason which allows you to say, although I am imperfect, and although the people around me are imperfect, and the people in this country around me are imperfect, we can still imagine what a perfect country looks like. We can still imagine principles that transcend our own weaknesses, and we can try to create a document, in this case the Constitution, which enshrines those principles, which we got in the Declaration, that aims us at something higher and that is universal, even though we sometimes fall short. So that was basically the project of this book, is to remind people that, like Frederick Douglass said, the America on the ground, its governments, are not the same as its ideals. And if the government, like a ship, is astray, you don't throw the compass overboard. So that's the motivation here.
All right, thank you. And Kariem, can you tell us a little bit about your book and also your career?
Okay. Yeah, my name is Kariem Haqq, and I've been an activist for a number of years. I started like when I was in my 19 years old, and I was studying a lot of history, a lot of the black history, trying to find out about myself and my struggles as a people. And I've been studying, and I got involved in economics. That's my passion. But economics had me to research and study more, and when I started going back through history, I started discovering this 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. because I had been reading all these books before, but nobody, black or white historians, emphasized them or hardly even mentioned them. So I'm saying, boy, this 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment is some powerful stuff. Why was it, ignored? I said, well, if nobody else is going to write about it, I'm going to write about it, because I think they're so important. The 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, 15th Amendment. When we study the whole history, so it made me go back and study even more. So I started studying the abolitionist movement, how it started and everything, and then I wrote this book on how the abolitionist movement started and how it culminated into the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Because the 13th, the 14th, and 15th Amendment are the most important legislations in our history coming out of slavery. And if we really realize it, we should know this and understand them, because that's our foundation from everything else we've been doing up until today. All our progress, we had to get our freedom first. We had to become citizens, and we had to be able to vote. So all our progress, this is our foundation. We need to go back to the basics. But I had to write about this because nobody else was writing about it. Nobody else was talking about it. And I'm saying, this is too important. And when I talk to people throughout my community and just anywhere I go, and I ask them what the 13th, the 14th, the 15th Amendments are, 90% of them don't know. And I'm saying, wow, this is shocking. I mean, how are you going to talk about your history and everything, and you don't know that? Because they should be the first things you learn. So the 13th Amendment is what gave us our freedom. The 14th Amendment gave us citizenship and civil rights, and the 15th Amendment gave us the right to vote. So 13th, freedom, 14th, citizenship, and the 15th, right to vote. We had to get those things in place before we could make the progress we have today. So I've been promoting these ideas, and I established an organization called 13th Amendment Freedom Week Movement based upon the manual. And I say, well, a lot of this information they're not teaching anywhere else. They're not teaching in schools. I say, let's start a cultural event. So, and translate this information through culture. So right now, we celebrate the 13th Amendment the first week of December. The 13th Amendment was ratified December the 6th in 1865. So we celebrate when the 13th Amendment was ratified. And we educate, we teach, we take events like this, and we put them right there in the first week of December. And we say we're celebrating the 13th Amendment Freedom Week, 13th Amendment, the ratification of the 13th Amendment. And then we teach people. And now a lot of people in my little town is learning about the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, where they wouldn't have learned that before. So this is why it's so important for me, and this is why I wrote this book, to try to spread this thing nationwide.
Oh, thank you, Kariem. And we'll get back to the 13th, 14th Amendment. I think you're absolutely right. They are critical pieces of the Constitution. But I want to turn over to you, GianCarlo. Race and the Constitution. We heard a little bit about the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, where race is clearly a part of the Constitution. But prior to that, we've got some problems with race in the Constitution. Can you talk to us a little bit about the origin of the Constitution and the omission of race, or the inclusion of race, or the discussion of race, or the necessity behind how our founders had to proceed?
Yeah, so what I'll focus on, I'll give you a précis. If you want a really great discussion about this, there's a book by a historian, I think at Princeton, named Sean Wilentz. The book is called No Property in Man. And what you see, if you go back and you read the debates of the Constitutional Convention, you do not see the sort of debates that you saw leading up to the Civil War. There was a profoundly different approach to slavery in the late 1700s than there was in the mid-1800s. What you see is that the Founding Fathers debating the Constitution are almost to a man. And this includes Thomas Jefferson, mind you, right, who owned a lot of slaves, who said, I've got a bunch of slaves, and yet I tremble when I think that my God is a just God, right? And they're wrestling with this problem of this ideal, which they believe, right, that all men are created equal. But the reality that slavery exists, and they feel like they are torn between the sort of temporal concerns of not upsetting an economy and the eternal concerns of creating a nation on eternal principles. And they are almost uniformly agreed that slavery must go, but we can't just axe it. One of the larger pragmatic concerns was that if you just try to axe it, the southern states will leave, and then the northern states will have zero ability to influence them in the future and to eradicate slavery in the future. So what James Madison, president of the convention, goes to great lengths to do is to say the Constitution will not eradicate slavery, but under no circumstances will it include a single line which gives approval to the notion that there can be property in human beings. And so they create this compromise where they will permit it where it exists, but enshrine ideals which will lead to its eventual eradication.
With a start like that, how do we get past the argument that some would have in the community that this country was not founded with black people's interest at heart?
Yeah, so the question really is, how do you judge a compromise, right? When is a compromise good and when is a compromise bad? And in order to judge a compromise, you need to recourse to something outside of the compromise. And ideally, you recourse to eternal principles and eternal truths. You recourse to justice, which is ultimately what the Declaration's claim is. It is a claim of justice. When it says that all men are created equal, that sounds injustice. And the question is that true? And it is true as a principle. And it is true that we failed to live up to the principle. But the question is, the compromise was aiming at that principle. The compromise was trying to create a nation which could live up to the principle. And in fact, we did eventually. Hundreds of thousands of men died. And it was a horrible, messy process whose implications go on. But the compromise, I think, can be judged right because it aimed at noble principles. It created a country which could live up to them.
And it developed into the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment.
Right, which is the culmination of
Which,
that
getting
process.
back to you, Kariem, you celebrate the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment as well we should. But as you may have recalled from my talk, that didn't quite do it. That was a legal standard that the Constitution was amended, and we had the end of slavery, we had the citizenship and the right to vote. But then we had 100 years of Jim Crow. How does our Constitution square up? How do we change the law and then not follow the law?
Well, I'm going to get to that, but I want to add that before the Declaration of Independence, this country was up under British rule for 160 years. Okay, and like you said, things couldn't change overnight. Slavery was instituted by the British, and they couldn't change overnight. But to show that the Founding Fathers wanted to get rid of slavery before we even had a Constitution. During the Northwest Ordinance, if anybody's familiar with the Northwest Ordinance, just before the Constitution, 1787, the Founding Fathers at that time, before we had a Constitution, in the Articles of Confederacy, they stated that it was some territories that was won from the British. It was the territory of Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, and parts of Minnesota that was east of the Mississippi. The west of the Mississippi was still under the French. But they said, before there was a Constitution, that any of these territories, if they ever want to become states, that slavery would not be permitted. Okay, so their intentions was not to increase and spread slavery. That's why this state right here, Illinois, never was a slave state. Ohio never was a slave state. Michigan never was a slave state. Indiana, Wisconsin, never was, Minnesota never was a slave state. And this was before the Constitution. And then during the Constitution, they put in a clause and they said that they couldn't do it right away, but they said within 20 years, the slave trade could be abolished. That's why the slave trade was abolished in 1808. So they wanted to do what they could, but they knew that in order to get the Constitution passed, they had to compromise with the Southern people, okay? So that's what, so anyway, like you were saying, when the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment was passed, it was passed after the Civil War, after the South was defeated. Now, when the South was defeated, they defeated the Emancipation Proclamation ended slavery in those 11 states that were rebelling. It didn't end slavery in any other states. Okay, now what happened is that the South was full of Democrats, and it was the people that defeated them was the Republican Party, and the Republican Party put in the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and the 15th Amendment. The South never was happy about that. They always worked against those 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. And most of all the when you say that they didn't enforce them, that was mostly down in those Southern Democratic states. Okay, so even though it was on paper, it was still better than still saying that people can own people as property. But it was a struggle. It was still a struggle because they didn't want to. The Southern people and those Democrats at the South, they did not want to. They still fought against those amendments.
It's still an example of the law being only as good as the people who adhere to it.
That's exactly right.
And we face that on a regular basis all the time.
Right.
We have to find ways in which, we're a lawful society. We don't do things by force. And so that's why we use our court system. That's why we come up with legal mechanisms to make change. And on that point, GianCarlo, the protected class. I took some shots at the protected class status, and I believe that it's time to do away with it.
Yeah.
There was a point in time when the protected class made sense, even though I consider it, as a lawyer, a flawed doctrine. It was a necessary doctrine because of the times.
Yeah.
What's your take, based on your scholarship, what's your take on the status of the protected class, the way that it has extended itself well beyond its intention, and what are our prospects of doing away with the protected class and ending all of this nonsense?
So I think your diagnosis from your speech is exactly correct. So I won't reiterate it. But we're going to get really legal nerdy now. So I just published a law review article which tries to plan a step forward. Where do we go from protected class? Because you also don't want a situation, right, where people are free to discriminate on the basis of race again. You don't want Harvard to be able to kick the Asians out, and you don't want people somewhere to, try to re-up Jim Crow, right? So you have to have some mechanism.
Well, there's a difference between discriminating against someone and then preferring someone over the other. And that's kind of what's happened. We've gone away from the discriminatory aspects of protected class, and we moved into we're going to use the protected class to expand the preferences of conduct.
So I actually don't think that those two things are different in kind. And the reason being is that in both cases, what you're doing is either you're holding somebody back or giving them a leg up on the basis of an arbitrary variable, right? Your skin color does not determine whether or not you have merited admission to Harvard or whether or not you are a great computer programmer or what have you. The problem in all of these cases is that a decision is being made on an arbitrary basis. And I think, and what I argue in this law review article, is that you can abandon the protected class framework and target the act, the arbitrary act of treating somebody on a basis which has no underlying merit. So, for instance, if I am an employer and I fire an employee of mine because I think he is an alien, I am wrong. And anyway, an alien isn't a protected category. I mean, an alien from Mars, right? Not an alien from another country. He's not a protected category, so he has no discrimination claim under a protected category station. But I've still done something wrong, haven't I? I've targeted somebody for treatment on the basis of something which is completely irrelevant. If I'm a software company and he is an alien and he can code well, okay. But what the wrong which has been done in that situation is the choice, right? Is the choice of acting in an arbitrary manner. It is not the fact that I have engaged with him on the basis of a protected class, right? That's where the wrong lies in conceptions of justice, right? We have this ancient rule of justice that like things must be treated alike and different things differently. That, I argue, ought to be the basis of our equal protection jurisprudence, so that it does not matter whether the person you fired is in fact black or is in fact Hispanic or whatever. The substantive state of your mind as to whether or not you are right that he belongs to a protected class or not is not what matters. What matters is, are you choosing to act in a way which is arbitrary? And because the law does not permit arbitrariness, and neither does justice. And so if you act in that way, if you target the choice to treat somebody differently on an arbitrary basis, you can prevent unjust discrimination of the sort of, I don't like the color of your skin, you're fired. But it also means, I argue, that will be more fairly applied to everybody so that you don't have protected versus unprotected classes.
Should it make a difference, though, in terms of the discrimination as to whether it's in a public accommodation or a setting versus a purely personal issue? I mean, do I have the right to discriminate as a individual?
You do, and here's where things get
I
complicated.
can hang out who I want to hang out.
Yes.
I can invite you over to my house. I can say, I don't want you people in my house.
Yes, and the reason that, now it may not be just for you to do that. It is lawful for you to do that. It may not be just for you to do that, but the risk that you get into when you start going into people's houses and their social clubs is that you may choke the ability of people to pursue actual goods, right? Just discriminations, if you will. So
But that's the market, because if someone opposes someone in their environment, at their business or their home, and other people find out about it, they have a choice. I'm not going to that person's business.
Yes, right. But you don't want to be in a situation where where you're intruding into private affairs. You then have to go to, say, churches and say your clergy can't take an oath to uphold the tenets of your faith, right? So when you enter into the private sphere to pursue injustice, you may accidentally choke out justice, right? So that's where, but to get back to the constitutional issue, right? It's clearer, right? The Constitution permits the federal government only certain intrusions into the personal sphere.
Okay. Kariem, what are your thoughts on the protected class? I mean, you're a champion for the 13th and 14th and 15th Amendment, and they're predicated on identifying and protecting immutable characteristics. Do you think that we are past the time of the use of the protected class, or do you think it still has value?
I really never given that a whole lot of thought. My only basic position is that nobody should be discriminated against because of their race, religion, sex, that sort of thing.
What about gender? Should I be able to discriminate against you? Not you. Let's say Dr. Wallace wants to be a girl. Should I be able to discriminate against him because of his choice of conduct in terms of wearing a wig and wearing a dress?
Like I say, anytime, only when I think about discrimination, I'm thinking about in terms of the public, where if you have a business establishment or you're an employee and you got it open to all the people,
Right.
then you shouldn't discriminate for no reason.
So
If it's a job that somebody can do, then if they qualify better than other person, then you shouldn't discriminate. But in your private setting, you can decide
Who you hang with and who you don't hang with.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Can you repeat the question?
How do you feel about a person being able to discriminate personally.
Oh,
And when I say discriminate,
Yeah.
let's understand something. Discrimination is really making a choice.
correct.
It isn't always of the negative connotation that's behind it. Discrimination means you're making a choice based on a personal belief system.
Right, right. And choices have to be reasonable. And I mean that in sort of the fullest sense of reason, the sort of Aristotelian sense of making decisions for reasons, which are good reasons, right? Which precludes arbitrary reasons. So if you wake up one day and you decide, I hate all men, that's arbitrary. But if you are saying, look, I am putting together a sports team for tackle football, and I know that men are bigger than women, and so we should have a women's team and separate from a men's team.
Doesn't a person have the right to hate?
Yeah, you do. That doesn't mean it's just.
It may not be just, but the conduct is prohibited by law.
Yes.
But a person can think, has the freedom to think and believe whatever they choose to believe.
Yeah, I would say license, right? Because I would say that sort of a true freedom is constrained by justice. But you still don't have a license to hate whoever you wish. But I wouldn't say that freedom, rightly understood, gives you the ability to hate
What do you think about that?
unjustly.
Are you free to think the way you want to think?
I think you should be free to think the way you want to think, but I just want to, I think you should be free to think the way you want.
I mean, we hope that people don't hate.
Right.
We encourage people away from hate, but we have the freedom in our minds to think and believe what we want to believe. I want to be free to believe what I want to believe. You want to be free to believe what you want to believe. What that means is the person who disagrees with you ought to be free as well.
Yeah. Yeah. But I wanted to kind of like emphasize a couple of things about the Declaration of Independence.
Please. How much time we got, Doc? Okay, give us 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, basically what I want to say is that we celebrate Independence Day, 4th of July. And we've been doing that for almost ever. But I don't think that that's enough. I think that celebrating the 4th of July, the Declaration of Independence, without celebrating the 13th Amendment is incomplete. Independence is one thing and freedom is another. Independence was one nation or one country separate itself from somebody else and they become sovereign and everything. They could celebrate that. But freedom is a higher level. You can be independent, but still the people in your country don't have freedom or don't experience freedom. If you don't celebrate freedom and teach the principles of freedom, you could be independent all you want to, but the people are not going to be free because they don't know what freedom is. So to celebrate independence is one thing. To celebrate and teach about freedom is very important. We celebrate independence here in America, but we don't celebrate freedom when freedom was actually ended. We celebrate another type of freedom, but it wasn't the end of slavery. But if we celebrate freedom, it's going to include independence. That's why when we celebrate independence, we don't learn anything else but about the Declaration of Independence. It don't really go beyond that. But it's not enough because we wasn't even a country at that time yet. We didn't have a constitution. We didn't have a Congress. We didn't have a president. We didn't have amendments. We didn't have 13th, 14th, 15th amendments. But if we celebrate freedom, I call it the spirit of 1776 and the soul of 1865. We celebrate freedom, then we have to go back and cover everything.
Yes.
And get a better education. Because right now, we just get a limited education when we only celebrate independence. So we have to create a time that we're going to celebrate freedom, which includes that, because now we got the Constitution.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I appreciate your comments, and with that, you just had the final word. So why don't you give a hand to our panelists, and we wish you a safe trip.
Thank you very
got
much.
a hard stop.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, thank you.